So this looks like it's the end of the game. I'm a huge fan of Warhammer 40k universe, and after finishing Mechanicus 1, I couldn't wait for Mechanicus 2 to release so I could finally play it. After spending around 40 hours with it, I can honestly say I had a great time. Now, let's address the elephant in the room right away. Are Mechanicus 1 and Mechanicus 2 the same game? The answer is no. They definitely share the same DNA, but they are built around different ideas. In the first game, the focus was on a small squad of highly customizable tech priests, and building each character exactly the way you wanted was one of the core mechanics. Mechanicus 2 takes a different approach. So I will start with the story first, but I won't spoil anything, as I'll only mention what happens during what is essentially the tutorial section. The game begins with an Adeptus Mechanicus expedition entering an ancient Necron tomb complex in search of knowledge and technology. And by doing so, they accidentally awaken a dormant Necron dynasty that has been sleeping for millions of years. And from there, the story splits into two separate campaigns. You can experience the conflict either from the Adeptus Mechanicus perspective or from the Necron perspective. In this playthrough, I choose the Necron campaign, so everything I'll be talking about from this point onward is based on that experience. Instead of controlling a small squad of tech priests, the focus shifts to commanding several Necron leaders, 5 in total, each with their own specialized army. While the leaders themselves are customizable, the customization is much more streamlined. Rather than creating completely different builds, each leader follows a predefined progression path that gradually unlocks and improves their unique abilities. Now, the big difference compared to the first game is that each leader also commands a dedicated army. The composition of those armies differ from leader to leader, and the available units expand as the leader levels up. By the end of the game, during most missions, I could deploy around 15-ish units from a roster of fewer than 20. Even though the armies aren't huge, there is a lot of variety between different armies, allowing for different tactical approaches by using scarabs, Necron warriors, immortals, deathmarks, which are my favorite, Lich Guard, Canoptech constructs, Praetorians, and so on. And it didn't take me long to discover my favorite leaders. Pekon was easily my favorite. His army focused heavily on long-range firepower, especially deathmarks. More than once, I eliminated bosses standing deep behind enemy lines simply by sniping them from across the map or teleporting deathmarks into position and doing focus fire on them. Key missions, which probably were supposed to be difficult, I finished them in a couple of turns by doing so, and it was extremely satisfying. Heki was my second favorite thanks to his healing abilities and his Canoptech focused army with spiders, wrath, and scarabs. Amuka came next, with Praetorians being the standout units in that army, but I ended up using Amuka mostly to reclaim territories and nothing else. As for Ominek and Obasis, I eventually stopped investing many resources into them because I mostly assigned them to world map operations, while my favorite leaders were handling the actual missions. Personally, I think having separate armies for each leader is actually an improvement over the first game. Battles do feel larger, more tactical, and require you to think about positioning multiple unit types instead of just a handful of characters. I also really enjoy deciding which leader should tackle each mission and which ones should be assigned to parallel operations on the world map. Planning ahead became part of the strategy, and I found that surprisingly enjoyable. One of the biggest improvements over the first game is the overall campaign structure. Instead of moving from tomb to tomb with relatively little narrative, this time there is a proper world map and a campaign that ties everything together. The world map introduces resource management. You'll constantly be collecting dynastic awakening to strengthen your dynasty, eminence to develop individual leaders, and living metal to repair and upgrade your armies. These systems add another strategic layer outside of combat that simply wasn't present in the original game. Overall, I thought the story was well written and noticeably stronger than the first game's narrative, but don't expect branching choices or multiple endings. It's a linear campaign, but one that kept me interested from beginning to end. One thing I did notice though was the overall difficulty. I played the game on Tactician difficulty, which sits above normal and just below Grim Darkness, which is the hardest difficulty. Yet, the game never felt particularly challenging. I didn't lose a single battle. And after the opening missions, I steadily became stronger and stronger. And by roughly 3/4 of the campaign, I had nearly everything fully upgraded. And from that point onward, I felt OP for the remainder of the game. That doesn't mean I stopped enjoying it. I still loved planning my turns, positioning my units, figuring out the best approach for every encounter. I just never really felt threatened. And ironically, I had very similar experience in the first Mechanicus. That being said, I've read the Adeptus Mechanicus campaign is generally considered more challenging, so this may not be as much of an issue there. There are, however, a few areas where I think the game could have been better though. First, the user interface. There are a lot of icons, symbols, and status effects throughout the game, yet not all of them include tooltips or clear explanations. I often had to memorize what certain symbols meant or simply learn them through experience. Also, some of the unit portraits shown during events between missions are also extremely small. making it difficult to immediately recognize which unit they are referring to. My second criticism is the soundtrack. The first Mechanicus had one of my favorite soundtracks in any Warhammer game. It was completely unique. Mechanicus II isn't bad, but compared to its predecessor, in my opinion, doesn't reach the same standard. The sound design itself, it's still excellent though. Graphically, the game looks fantastic. I really liked it. I also appreciated that missions weren't confined to underground tombs this time. Fighting across forests, deserts, and other outdoor environments added some much needed visual variety throughout the campaign. Technically, I did experience a few flickering textures, occasional frame drops and some stuttering, but nothing serious. As for bugs, I only encountered a handful of minor ones, and nothing ever prevented me from progressing or negatively affected my experience. Overall, this isn't a particularly long game. My playthrough took around 40 hours, during which I completed essentially every mission available, and took my time thinking through every encounter instead of rushing forward. When it comes to replayability, I think the game offers a decent amount, although I wouldn't call it endless. Probably the biggest reason to replay it is experiencing the Adeptus Mechanicus campaign, since I only played the Necron side. And even within the Necron campaign, you could focus on developing different leaders and thus experimenting with different army compositions instead of the ones used before. That said, the story is linear, leader progression is largely predefined, and there aren't any branching choices or radically different outcomes. So the replay value comes primarily from trying different playstyles rather than discovering an entirely different experience. If I had to rate Mechanicus II on a scale from 1 to 10, I would give it an 8.5. The user interface issues and the relatively easy difficulty prevent it from scoring higher, and I'm honestly tempted to deduct another half point because of the downgrade when it comes to the music. Still, despite those criticisms, I had a great time with Mechanicus II. I thoroughly enjoyed my Necron campaign, and I think it's a worthy successor that takes the series in a different direction rather than simply trying to recreate the original. If you played Mechanicus II yourself, please let me know in the comments what your experience was like. And if you played the Necron campaign, who was your favorite Necron leader? Which units ended up becoming your favorites? And if you enjoyed following this playthrough, feel free to subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel and helps these videos reach more people. For those of you who already have, thank you very much for your support. But until next time, thank you very much for watching. Stay safe, take care, and bye bye.